Hello. 5 people you meet in heaven. Last time we'd read, Marguerite said to Eddie, hey, don't get killed. And we'd also seen that Eddie was a prisoner, although he'd never really learned to be one. A freed soldier is often furious. The days and nights he lost, the torture and humiliation he suffered, it all demands a fierce revenge, a balancing of the accounts. So when Morton, his arms full of stolen weapons, said to the others, let's burn it down, there was quick, if not logical, agreement. Inflated by their new sense of control, the men scattered with the enemy's firepower. Smitty to the entrance of the mine shaft, Morton and Eddie to the oil barrels, and the captain went in search of a transport vehicle. 5 minutes, then back here, he barked. That bombing's going to start soon and we need to be gone. Got it? 5 minutes. Which was all it took to destroy what had been their home for nearly half a year. Timing, huh? Just like fifth period. Which was all it took to destroy what had been their home for nearly half a year. Smitty dropped the grenades down the mine shaft and ran. Eddie and Morton rolled 2 barrels into the hut complex, pried them open, then one by one fired the nozzles of their newly acquired flamethrowers and watched the huts ignite. Burn, Morton yelled. Burn, Eddie yelled. The mine shaft exploded from below. Black smoke rose from the entrance. Smitty, his work done, ran toward the meeting point. Morton kicked his barrel into a hut and unleashed a rope-like burst of flame. Eddie watched, sneered, then moved down the path to the final hut. It was larger, more like a barn, and he lifted his weapon. This was over, he said to himself. Over. All those weeks and months in the hands of those people, those subhuman guards with their bad teeth and their bony faces and the dead hornets in their soup. He didn't know what would happen next, but it could not be any worse than what they had endured. Eddie squeezed the trigger. Whoosh! Fire shot up quickly. The bamboo was dry, and within a minute the walls of the barn were melting in orange and yellow flames. Off in the distance, Eddie heard the rumble of an engine. The captain, he hoped, had found something to escape in. And then suddenly, from the skies, the first sounds of bombing, the noise they had been hearing every night. It was even closer now, and Eddie realized whoever it was would see the flames. They might be rescued. He might be going home. He turned to the burning barn and... What was that? He blinked. What was that? Something darted across the door opening. Eddie tried to focus. The heat was intense, and he shielded his eyes with his free hand. He couldn't be sure, but he thought he'd just seen a small figure running inside the fire. Hey! Eddie yelled, stepping forward, lowering his weapon. Hey! The roof of the barn began to crumble, splashing sparks and flame. Eddie jumped back. His eyes watered. Maybe it was a shadow. Eddie, now! Morton was up the path, waving for Eddie to come. Eddie's eyes were stinging. He was breathing hard. He pointed and yelled, I think there's someone in there. Morton put a hand to his ear. What? Someone in there. Morton shook his head. He couldn't hear. Eddie turned and was almost certain he saw it again. There, crawling inside the burning barn, a child-sized figure. It had been more than 2 years since Eddie had seen anything besides grown men, and the shadowy shape made him think suddenly of his small cousins back at the pier and the little folks' miniature railway he used to run, and the roller coasters and the kids on the beach, and Marguerite and her picture, and all that he'd shut from his mind for so many months. Hey, come out, he yelled, dropping the flamethrower, moving even closer. I won't shoot. A hand grabbed his shoulder, yanking him backward. Eddie spun, his fist clenched. It was Morton yelling, Eddie, we gotta go now. Eddie shook his head. No, wait, I think there's someone. There's nobody in there now. Eddie was desperate. He turned back to the barn. Morton grabbed him again. This time Eddie spun around and swung wildly, hitting him in the chest. Morton fell to his knees. Eddie's head was pounding, his face twisted in anger. He turned again to the flames, his eyes nearly shut. There, what was that? Rolling behind a wall? There? He stepped forward, convinced something innocent was being burned to death in front of him, and then the rest of the roof collapsed with a roar, casting sparks like electric dust that rained down on his head. In that instant, the whole of the war came surging out of him like bile. He was sickened by the captivity and sickened by the murders, sickened by the blood and goo drying on his temples, sickened by the bombing and the burning and the futility of it all. And at that moment, he just wanted to salvage something, a piece of Rebozo, a piece of himself, something. And he staggered into the flaming wreckage, madly convinced there was a soul inside every black shadow. Planes roared overhead, and shots from their guns rang out in drum beats. Eddie moved as if in a trance. He stepped past a burning puddle of oil, and his clothes caught fire from behind. A yellow flame moved up his calf and thigh. He raised his arms and hollered, "I'll help you! Come out! I won't shoot!" A piercing pain ripped through Eddie's leg. He screamed a long, hard curse, then crumbled to the ground. Blood was spewing below his knee. Plane engines roared. The skies lit in bluish flashes. He lay there, bleeding and burning, his eyes shut against the searing heat, and for the first time in his life he felt ready to die. And then someone yanked him backward, rolling him in the dirt, extinguishing the flames, and he was too stunned and weak to resist. He rolled like a sack of beans. Soon he was inside a transport vehicle, and the others were around him, telling him to hang on, hang on. His back was burned, and his knee had gone numb, and he was getting dizzy and tired, so very tired. The captain nodded slowly as he recalled those last moments. "You remember anything about how you got out of there?" he asked. "Not really," Eddie said. "It took 2 days. You were in and out of consciousness. You lost a lot of blood." "We made it through, though," Eddie said. "Yeah," the captain drew the word out and punctuated it with a sigh. "That bullet got you pretty good." In truth, the bullet had never been fully removed. It had cut through several nerves and tendons and shattered against a bone, fracturing it vertically. Eddie had 2 surgeries. Neither cured the problem. The doctor said he'd be left with a limp, one likely to get worse with age as the misshapen bones deteriorated. "The best we can do," he was told. Was it? Who could say? All Eddie knew was he'd awoken in a medical unit, and his life was never the same. His running was over. His dancing was over. Worse, for some reason, the way he used to feel about other things was over too. He withdrew. Things seemed silly or pointless. War had crawled inside of Eddie, in his leg and in his soul. He learned many things as a soldier. He came home a different man. What is going to be the second lesson Eddie learns in heaven?